Hey, it's Alex Williams of the New Stack. Welcome to the New Stack Makers, a podcast where we talk about application development, deployment, and management at scale. The Cloud Foundry Foundation is an independent nonprofit organization formed to sustain the development, promotion, and adoption of Cloud Foundry as the industry standard platform for cloud applications. Cloud Foundry is an application platform. It provides a choice of clouds, developer frameworks, and application services. Cloud Foundry makes it faster and easier to build, test, deploy, and scale applications. It's an open source project and is available through a variety of private cloud distributions and public cloud instances. Learn more at cloudfoundry.org. Hey everyone, here today at the Cloud Foundry Summit in Europe at The Hague. And I'm joined in our conversation today with Jennifer Spinney, a staff software engineer at Pivotal, and Vlad Iovanov, technical lead Cloud Foundry at SUSE. How are you both?
Doing well.
Great.
Yeah, happy to be here.
So we've seen the maturity of Kubernetes quite a bit, and Cloud Foundry predates Kubernetes. And as container orchestration evolved and as we started seeing more microservices technologies, there were components built into Cloud Foundry that were used as a way to containerize to some extent. Isn't that true?
Oh yeah, definitely.
And so that speaks to the history, I think, of both Project Eirini and Project Quarks, which is the subject of our discussion today. I would love a description or definition of Eirini and Quarks and that context with Kubernetes and the Cloud Foundry history. So Jennifer, maybe you could start with Eirini.
Sure. So Cloud Foundry traditionally has this component called Diego, which is actually a rewrite of the old way that containers used to be run in Cloud Foundry via these DEAs. We replaced that with Diego. When we did that, we kind of introduced this hard boundary between the API of Cloud Foundry and the back end that schedules containers and schedules your actual app workloads. So then when Kubernetes started picking up steam, because we have this hard boundary now between the Cloud Foundry API and the back end that's actually scheduling jobs, we could look at swapping out Diego with just Kubernetes, because it's kind of doing the same thing. Back when we started Diego, Kubernetes wasn't fully there yet. There was still a lot of maturing to do, but now I think we're seeing Kubernetes becoming way more mature, and it's much more possible to now just drop in Kubernetes instead of Diego.
And you were talking today about Project Quarks. Maybe you could just help us understand what Project Quarks is, and then we can move on kind of with the conversation again, and with the context of Cloud Foundry and the Kubernetes world.
So Project Quarks is this effort to containerize Cloud Foundry and make it work natively on top of Kubernetes. So as you probably know, Cloud Foundry is usually deployed with BOSH. BOSH is meant for the VM world, but we're noticing that as Kubernetes matures, it's becoming a manager of infrastructure. So given that everyone knows Kubernetes and is using it to deploy infrastructure, the question is, how can we provide Cloud Foundry on top of Kubernetes, using Kubernetes as infrastructure? And Project Quarks is the effort to do that.
So, what did Diego originally do? What was his role?
To figure out where you're going to run a particular container representing your app workload. Or let's say I have an app that has 20 instances, that means 20 different containers. I need to figure out what, in this case, VMs to actually run those containers on and do it in some sort of an even way, and make sure that if one app crashes or one VM goes down, that gets like restarted automatically, and I don't have to worry about it. I don't have to be concerned about restarting my app instances, and I know that everything is going to be distributed in a nice way. So Diego was responsible for that sort of distributed container scheduling aspect.
What has evolved then in Kubernetes now that makes Project Eirini relevant?
I think we have, I think part of it is the confidence that, that you can put production workloads on Kubernetes. I wasn't involved heavily with the evaluation at the time in deciding whether we could use Kubernetes instead of Diego. At the very beginning of the Diego project, there was some exploration of Kubernetes. Was quite new then, and I think there was like an investigation into, can we just put all of our app workloads directly onto Kubernetes? And the answer was like, no, it's not production ready. We don't think it can scale. And I think that was one of the big factors that led towards Cloud Foundry developing their own container runtime engine. At one point in time, it was hoped that Diego itself could be a standalone thing that can actually exist outside of Cloud Foundry, and it's just your general purpose container runtime engine, kind of how Kubernetes is today. And part of that was just the ability to scale. Like, we did a lot of performance testing on Diego, and we made sure that we could run, I think it was 250,000 containers without any problems, and we knew we could do that on Diego. I wasn't involved in evaluating Kubernetes, but what I had heard was there wasn't that confidence that Kubernetes could scale to that same extent, and there wasn't confidence that it was totally robust, especially at scale.
So with Quarks, then, you know, it is an incubating effort, as I understand, correct?
That's true.
And it packages, as you're saying, Cloud Foundry application runtime, correct? Mm-hmm. As containers instead of those virtual machines. Kubernetes introduced a operator model, and part of what Quartz does, and I think you're showing this today, is it creates that manifest. And with the operator model, it basically details exactly how the application should be deployed on a Kubernetes cluster, correct?
Yeah, so because we have these custom resources that an operator is supposed to manage in Kubernetes.
Those custom resource definitions, correct?
Yeah. The CRDs. We can now define a CRD that's a BOSH deployment. So essentially you're extending the Kubernetes API to include the idea of a BOSH deployment. So then I can create an object, like using kubectl create-f, and inside I have this object that's a BOSH deployment. And the operator that we've built is responsible with managing the life cycle of the BOSH deployment.
Okay.
So this is pretty cool. We were able to, like I said today, it's exactly CF deployment. You get the exact same deployment manifest, you give it to Kubernetes, and then the operator will consume all of that information and transform it so that it runs pods and stateful sets and jobs and all of these things.
So what's the relationship between Eirini and Quarks then? What is the corollary? Is it just the evolution of Cloud Foundry to be able to more fully integrate it with Kubernetes? Are there use cases for integrating both?
I think so. I think the connection between the two is Kubernetes, but as you'll learn, you can actually run Eirini without using Quarks, and you can use Quarks without using Eirini. But I think it's amazing when you do both, right? Because then it's full Kubernetes.
So Eirini is focused on using Kubernetes for the app workloads, whereas Quarks is all of it. So actually the Cloud Foundry components themselves and making those run on Kubernetes. Whereas Eirini doesn't necessarily have an opinion about where the rest of Cloud Foundry lives. It's concerned mostly with the app workloads being on Kubernetes.
Had this been something that you'd have to do from scratch before? What was it required of you to kind of, what was required of the developer or the engineers who were building, who were trying to build with Cloud Foundry and Kubernetes?
So this is not our first attempt. We've had a previous project called Fissile,
yes,
which tried to do the same thing, but I think it tried to do too much at build time.
Right.
It's like building all of these Docker images, and CF deployment is an amazing thing because it gets released so often, and you have this really high confidence that it's quality stuff in there. But because Fissile had to consume this in such a different manner, you ended up with a very long time to consume a new CF deployment and convert it into Docker images and then to a releasable thing. So, but from that experience, we now understand a better way to build Docker images for BOSH releases. So just the Docker images, not orchestrating them on Kubernetes, just building those. And it now works seamlessly in the back end. Like every time there's a new BOSH release, we build a Docker image for it automatically. And then it's our responsibility to just consume them. We don't have to reintegrate what CF deployment already integrated. So we learned that the hard way with Fissile. So that was a huge
But
plus.
Fissile is still part.
Yes, but we just use it to build these Docker images at build time, and then it gets out of the way. It's just a simple build tool. And then as for the developers, we really needed an understanding of BOSH, top to bottom. Everything that it does, everything for links, how it treats instance groups, add-ons, variables, implicit variables, what we call implicit variables. What's the ordering of how it does things? Does it generate variables first and apply ops files after? All of that. It's like we've built a BOSH director specific to Kubernetes. And it was fun.
It was fun.
Doing it. Yeah.
That's
still
really
fun.
important.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about then where Quartz is going. What is its roadmap going forward?
So our focus now after Summit is going to be to have something stable. So we have this released, we've released 0.4.0. We're probably going to have a few patch releases there. We found a few bugs during Summit. But then our focus is going to be to split the operator into 4 or maybe 5 separate controllers, separate projects, separate GitHub repos, so that they become building blocks for anyone that wants to use them, whether it's Cloud Foundry or not. And the Quarks project is not just about the operator. I think it's a continued effort to try to get to be more Kubernetes native. So as these building blocks become available, we hope that other teams could try and consume them. They see, okay, I can't use Kubernetes right now because it has these missing features, but with these building blocks, we have BOSH parity. So then with those, you could build a Kubernetes native way of deploying CAPI or the log aggregator system or whatever you like. So that's our vision of the project. Split it up so other people could use it for various other reasons, and then stabilize and then help the community adopt these.
So Jen, when you're listening to that, how's Pivotal thinking about integrating Eirini? How is it thinking about integrating Project Quarks? And what would something that Val is describing would be helpful?
So right now I'm working on a project called Pivotal Application Service for Kubernetes, which is integrating Eirini into the existing Pivotal distribution of Cloud Foundry, Pivotal Application Service. What we're doing is a little bit more incremental right now. Right now we have the rest of Cloud Foundry BOSH deployed because we know that we trust the lifecycle management of BOSH for the other components, and we have just replaced Diego and put in Eirini. However, I think we have the same desire to see where we can make things more Kubernetes native, have a common, if you just have Kubernetes as your tool that you're using, that means you don't have to learn two different technologies as an operator. We're still evaluating what the next steps are going to be, but right now we're pretty interested in Eirini, and we have an alpha release where we've integrated Eirini into our pivotal application service.
Are you finding that people are using it in kind of this way that Jen's describing? Are there other use cases you're starting to see emerge?
Haven't seen other projects adopt it yet, but we've just released a workable version. But a controller for extended secrets, what we call them, that's very useful. It can generate passwords for you, certificates. It can even do so with Kubernetes CSRs, automatically approve them. We're thinking about adding Let's Encrypt support. And then for jobs, that controller has the ability to have errands, like manual errands, where you want to have a Kubernetes job that doesn't run right away. You want to trigger it in some fashion, manually or not. That's another controller that is probably very useful for some projects. And there are so many features in the operator, all inspired from Bosch, that I think will be useful in some way or another.
Bosch really is the foundation, isn't it?
Yeah, it has been. And I think it's held up really well over time. I mean, I think the downside of Bosch is just that people only have so many tools that they can learn. And right now, a lot of folks are learning Kubernetes. And so it's tough right now to say you have to learn how to use this tool and learn how to use this tool. And I think that's the problem that we're needing to work through right now. And I think Quarks is one of the approaches.
Because it treats Bosch as an operator, right?
Yeah, essentially, yeah. You're switching the director with a Kubernetes native operator.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What are the customers asking about? Are you echoing to some respect what they're saying? Like, hey, I'm just trying to get my head around Kubernetes, and how am I going to kind of learn both Bosch and Kubernetes?
I think there are a variety of different customer types. There are some that actually are not rushing to Kubernetes.
Right.
There are some that are super happy. Diego works really, really well.
Yeah, it's purpose-built.
It is purpose-built. It has been fine-tuned to run Cloud Foundry workloads very well. It is stable, and so there are a lot of customers that are just happy with that. They just want to know that that's going to continue working, and they're happy. There are other customers that are much more I have developers that are shouting to get Kubernetes experience, and they want to use Kubernetes, and this is the new thing, and I don't want to learn some other tool because all my devs, all my operators are asking about Kubernetes. So I think there's a variety. There's actually a very large spectrum of what customers are saying, which is part of what makes it kind of difficult.
Right, yeah. But again, it's like those abstractions that people are reaching for to some extent, aren't they? Mm-hmm. I mean, and that comes with maturity of projects, right? So Cloud Foundry has matured quite a bit. Kubernetes is not as, is still maturing, even though people say that they're bored of it or they don't want to hear about it.
Yeah.
But it's going to be discussed for a long time coming. So what are you excited about at this event, just in conclusion? What is it that you're finding, you're listening to people here that gets you excited about the development and sparking some thoughts maybe about the direction for Project Quarks or in your work, Eirini Quark, or however it might be integrated?
For me, what was very exciting was what just happened a half hour ago with the hands-on lab, because it was the first time we've put everything into the hands of other people. So we just had a release, and it worked for, I think, 8 out of 9 people. Dr. Nick found a bug, but it worked for everyone else, and everyone was able to install the operator, install SCF on Cube, on GKE, and then push an app, and it all worked. So that was validating that it's not too hard. People can use it, and that feedback was
8 out of 9 ain't bad.
Important.
Yeah. And Dr. Nick, I mean,
The troublemaker.
Troublemaker. Yeah. How about yourself? Anything exciting that you're...
I think I'm getting a really strong vibe from this conference that everyone is figuring out how we're moving to Kubernetes.
Yeah.
And, Project Quarks is one aspect of it, and Eirini is one aspect of it. I think this is a very exciting time for Cloud Foundry because there's a lot of decisions for the direction of our project. And I think there are a lot of people that are here right now that are highly involved in setting the direction or have ideas about where we should go and how we should get to Kubernetes. And so I think that's very exciting, just to run into people and have these very interesting conversations. There's a lot of different places
Plus one
we
on
could go.
that. Yeah. I was just talking to people about, again, how high quality CF deployment is, and if you want to bring that level of quality and integration to Kubernetes, there's so many questions still to be answered. Like, how will our pipelines look like? How do we freeze all these software versions if not everything is a Bosch release and you want to replace something with a Helm chart or something? We have no idea how that looks in the future, but it's amazing to try and figure it out.
Well, we've covered a lot here. We talked about Eirini, we talked about Quartz, we talked about how they've evolved as projects and some of the use cases and how they're being integrated, for example, at Pivotal. And we also talked about what people are excited about and really the maturity, as you're saying, about Kubernetes and Cloud Foundry in particular in this direction. So Jennifer and Vlad, thank you very much for taking some time to talk with me here at the Cloud Foundry Summit in Europe.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us. Thanks.
The Cloud Foundry Foundation is an independent nonprofit organization formed to sustain the development, promotion, and adoption of Cloud Foundry as the industry standard platform for cloud applications. Cloud Foundry is an application platform. It provides a choice of clouds, developer frameworks, and application services. Cloud Foundry makes it faster and easier to build, test, deploy, and scale applications. It's an open source project and is available through a variety of private cloud distributions and public cloud instances. Learn more at cloudfoundry.org. Listen to more episodes of the New Stack Makers at thenewstack.io/podcasts. Please rate and review us on iTunes, like us on YouTube, and follow us on SoundCloud. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.